The debate over supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine underscores significant geopolitical tension. For Moscow, the prospect is deeply concerning, while for Kyiv, the request is urgent. This analysis begins with a strategic question: can long-range missiles truly shift the war's trajectory? By examining the technical characteristics of Tomahawk missiles, Ukraine's rationale for seeking them, Russia's apprehensions, and the broader implications for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and global security, this discussion seeks to explore plausible pathways to an answer. The discussion integrates expert perspectives and recent developments in military assistance. What are Tomahawk cruise missiles? Tomahawk cruise missiles are long-range, subsonic precision strike weapons originally developed for naval operations. These missiles can travel over 1,500 kilometers and fly at low altitudes to evade detection. Advanced guidance systems, including the Global Positioning System, GPS, inertial navigation, and terrain contour matching, enable them to accurately strike fortified targets from significant distances. Their warheads are capable of inflicting substantial damage on command centers, airfields, supply depots, and critical infrastructure. Over several decades, Tomahawk missiles have been a reliable asset for the United States and allied forces. They have been employed in conflicts ranging from the Gulf War to recent operations in the Middle East, consistently demonstrating the capacity to deliver early, high-impact strikes. This established operational effectiveness underpins Ukraine's urgent interest in acquiring these systems. Why Ukraine wants Tomahawks? For Ukraine, acquiring Tomahawk missiles would represent a significant advancement in long-range strike capability. Existing Ukrainian weaponry, though effective, lacks the necessary range. Tomahawks would enable Ukraine to target air bases in Crimea, logistics hubs, missile production facilities, and command centers located deep behind Russian lines, including within Russian territory. This expanded reach would render previously secure strategic targets vulnerable. In a potential campaign, Tomahawks could first disrupt logistics by targeting supply chains and depots, thereby slowing Russian reinforcements. In turn, they could compromise air domain control by attacking air bases and radar sites. Finally, placing critical command centers at risk may compel Russian leadership to reconsider its strategic posture and engage in negotiations. This sequence of operations exemplifies how Tomahawks could translate range into concrete battlefield advantages for Ukraine. The significance of Tomahawk missiles extends beyond increased range. Their deployment would alter the operational landscape by enabling Ukraine to threaten infrastructure previously considered invulnerable. Consequently, Russia would be compelled to allocate resources to defend rear areas, potentially reducing pressure on the front lines. The psychological effect is also substantial, as the perception of security behind Russian lines would diminish. These operational and psychological factors are central to Ukraine's strategic considerations. Politically and diplomatically, Tomahawk missiles provide Ukraine with significant leverage. If Russian leadership perceives that bases and command centers are vulnerable, even deep within Russian territory, it may be incentivized to engage in negotiations more earnestly. Thus, Tomahawks function as both a bargaining instrument and a military asset. Tomahawk missiles would also enable Ukraine to achieve greater parity in the conflict. Russia has launched cruise missile attacks against Ukrainian cities and infrastructure with limited repercussions. Possessing equivalent strike capabilities would allow Ukraine to adopt a more proactive stance, potentially deterring further aggression. Why Russia fears Tomahawks? The contentious nature of Tomahawk missile transfers is evident from the Russian perspective. Moscow's concerns center on three primary factors: vulnerabilities in air defense, the risk of escalation, and the geopolitical signals such transfers would send. Russia's air defense systems, despite their extensive coverage, remain imperfect. Tomahawk cruise missiles can exploit gaps in radar coverage by flying at low altitudes and high speeds to evade detection. Defending a large territory presents inherent challenges. A coordinated Tomahawk strike could overwhelm localized defenses or target lightly protected areas, thereby threatening critical military-industrial assets distant from the front lines. A significant escalation risk is also present. The Kremlin has stated that supplying Tomahawk missiles would constitute a qualitatively new phase in the conflict. Russian officials characterize the provision of such weapons as indicative of increasing North Atlantic Treaty Organization NATO involvement. Historical precedents, such as NATO's eastward expansion and the 2008 Georgia conflict, have consistently elicited strong Russian responses, illuminating their perception of red lines being crossed. In past episodes, NATO's moves have been perceived as direct threats to Russian influence and security, prompting diplomatic and military responses. This development is perceived as a potential catalyst for broader conflict, possibly involving United States or NATO personnel more directly. The transfer of missile systems capable of striking Russian territory would signal a strong commitment from the United States and its allies. Such actions would undermine Moscow's perceived leverage and previously established red lines, as NATO would be enabling Ukraine to target critical Russian assets. For Russia, Tomahawk missiles have become emblematic of Western resolve and proximity to its strategic core. Although some Russian officials publicly downplay the significance of Tomahawk missiles, their rhetoric often includes threats of severe consequences and references to potential nuclear escalation. This suggests underlying concerns regarding the capabilities Tomahawks would provide Ukraine and the broader strategic shift they represent. Expert perspectives and recent developments. Expert analysis indicates that, despite their considerable power, Tomahawk missiles are subject to several practical limitations. Limited availability is a significant constraint. Tomahawk missiles are scarce within the United States inventories, necessitating careful consideration of domestic requirements before any transfer to Ukraine. Western analysts estimate that only a small number, possibly several dozen, could be provided. While insufficient to alter the overall course of the conflict, each missile could target high-value assets and exert disproportionate effects if employed strategically. The opportunity costs for Washington must also be weighed carefully. Redirecting Tomahawks that might otherwise be allocated to contingencies in the Indo-Pacific or Gulf regions could affect U.S. grand strategy, potentially prompting a recalibration of priorities in these regions. Highlighting these trade-offs underscores the strategic scarcity of these missiles. A further challenge involves launch platforms. Tomahawk missiles are typically deployed from naval vessels, which Ukraine does not possess. The United States has developed the Typhon land-based launch system for the ground deployment of Tomahawks, but it remains experimental and is not widely operational. Any transfer would necessitate not only the missiles themselves but also launchers, training, and integration support. These requirements introduce significant logistical and political complexities for potential donor states. The prospect of transferring Tomahawk missiles has itself become a diplomatic tool. Recent indications from United States leadership regarding potential transfers have been used as leverage in negotiations, reportedly prompting Moscow to engage in diplomatic discussions it had previously avoided. Ukrainian officials interpret this as evidence that the threat of deploying Tomahawks can influence Russian decision-making before any actual transfer. Recent military assistance to Ukraine has incrementally increased the range of available weaponry. Initial deliveries included the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, HIMARS, followed by Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles, and subsequently the United States Army Tactical Missile System, ATACMS. Each system has extended Ukraine's strike capability. The introduction of Tomahawk missiles would represent a further advancement, increasing operational range from several hundred to over 1,000 kilometers. European allies are closely monitoring the situation. Certain states, such as Poland, have expressed support for providing Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles to counter Russian advances. Others remain cautious, citing concerns that such actions could provoke a severe Russian response or lead to unintended escalation. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has not formally endorsed the transfer of Tomahawks. Nonetheless, the ongoing discussion reflects a significant shift in policy considerations compared to the previous year. The potential for a missile to traverse hundreds of kilometers and strike targets behind the front lines is now a subject of active debate. This discussion underscores the dual nature of contemporary conflict, where perception is as influential as military capability. While the hardware effects of the Tomahawk in altering military balances are profound, the psychological or information effects can be equally game-changing, shaping diplomatic negotiations and strategic posturing. The apprehension in Moscow, the expectations in Kyiv, and the strategic considerations in Washington and Brussels all converge on the significance of this missile system. As illustrated by the map animation, a missile's ability to penetrate deeply into adversary territory is emblematic of information age influence campaigns, where perception management can pause and evoke reactions just as powerfully as physical strikes can. Implications for regional and global security. Should Ukraine acquire and effectively employ Tomahawk missiles, the dynamics of the conflict could change substantially. Russia may be compelled to disperse its defensive resources, reinforce rear positions, and potentially limit the use of forward bases. Ukraine could also gain additional diplomatic leverage. The credibility of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, as a deterrent might be enhanced by demonstrating concrete Western support. However, significant risks accompany these opportunities. Should Russia escalate its attacks or threaten additional forms of weaponization, including cyber or nuclear means, the conflict could intensify. There is also a risk that miscalculation or misidentification could result in unintended cross-border incidents. Potential regional responses to Russian escalation could include an increase in Poland's air defense posture and naval redeployments by Baltic states as a precautionary measure to strengthen their defense. These actions could place additional pressure on NATO to respond, further complicating the conflict dynamics. Moreover, the feedback loop created by these regional reactions to Russian signaling could escalate tensions and complicate diplomatic efforts to find a peaceful resolution. The potential consequences are considerable, emphasizing the need for careful consideration of all possible scenarios. Extending Tomahawk missile capabilities to a non-NATO partner such as Ukraine would establish a significant precedent. Future conflicts may involve additional states seeking advanced long-range strike systems. Globally, this could prompt a reassessment of deterrence frameworks and escalation thresholds. In Europe, countries previously considered secure due to geographic distance may reevaluate their vulnerabilities, challenging Moscow's traditional sphere of influence. In conclusion, Ukraine seeks Tomahawk missiles for their extended range, psychological impact, and strategic leverage to target areas previously considered secure by Russia. Conversely, Russia fears these weapons due to the vulnerabilities they expose, the potential for escalation, and the message they convey regarding Western commitment. Tomahawk missiles have thus emerged as both a geopolitical instrument and a symbol of evolving strategic possibilities. The deployment of Tomahawk missiles by Ukraine would constitute a significant turning point in the ongoing conflict. Even in the absence of actual deployment, the ongoing debate has already influenced perceptions, affected diplomatic negotiations, and altered Russian assessments of rear area security. Regardless of their operational use, the prospect of Tomahawk missiles exerts substantial influence in both the military and diplomatic arenas. In conclusion, the potential deployment of Tomahawk missiles remains a critical factor in the evolving security landscape over Ukraine and Russia. The forthcoming decisions regarding these systems may prove decisive, with the Tomahawk potentially serving as a pivotal element in shaping the future of European security. Looking ahead, two possible outcomes emerge. In one scenario, the integration of Tomahawks accelerates conflict resolution by compelling Russian leadership to negotiate due to strategic vulnerabilities, leading to a more stable European environment. Alternatively, their deployment could prolong the conflict, with increased military engagements and heightened regional tensions, leading to prolonged attrition. Policymakers must carefully consider these divergent futures, as the stakes are high in shaping the trajectory of this geopolitical contest.